Hello, everybody. Welcome to the fertility track of the Giant Health Event 2020, curated by the Fertility Show. I hope you're well wherever you are joining us from in the world, and I hope the technology is all working for you. We know what technology is like. My name is Jessica Hepburn, and my job this morning is to introduce the speakers to you, our wonderful speakers, and also chair the Q&A at the end of each session. And there is also an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you would like. Just a little bit about me. I am a former fertility patient myself. I went through 11 rounds of IVF. I subsequently wrote 2 books about my experience, The Pursuit of Motherhood and 21 Miles Swimming in Search of the Meaning of Motherhood. And then I founded Fertility Fest, which is the world's first arts festival dedicated to fertility. And today I'm here in my capacity as the content director for the Fertility Show, who are sponsoring this track. Now, 1 in 6 couples around the world are estimated to be affected by infertility. But in actual fact, many more people are now going through fertility treatment because, of course, it's being used by same-sex couples and also solo parents who may have no fertility problems at all. And the Fertility Show is the only dedicated fertility event in the UK that takes place in London every year. And it's been running for around 10 years. It attracts over 100 exhibitors a year and 3,500 visitors. And in its lifetime, it has created thousands of families. It also supports Fertility Network UK, who are the national charity supporting fertility patients, with a very generous donation each year to their work. Now, this event this morning is going to focus on fertility tech, and we've invited along some of our best exhibitors and speakers to talk about the development and innovations in tech in fertility. We're going to be hearing about the use of tech in fertility and infertility, how a digital approach might help fertility through things like fertility apps. We're going to be looking at how AI is assisting embryo selection in the lab and how phenotype matching is bringing together fertility patients and donors of eggs, sperms and gametes. And we're also finally going to be looking at something that I know people are always interested in, money, fertility tech investment. My job is simply to introduce each speaker and chair the Q&A, as I said, and I'm delighted that we're kicking off with a brilliant speaker and also a very good friend of mine, Professor Joyce Harper. Joyce is Professor of Reproductive Science at the Institute of Women's Health at the University College London, and she has been working in fertility and IVF for over 30 years. She also, and in fact many of our speakers do this morning, has personal experience of fertility treatment. She has 3 sons born through IVF. And her new book, Your Fertility, is coming out in spring next year. So we're going to be kicking off with Joyce now with an introduction to the use of tech in fertility and infertility. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Joyce Harper and I'm Professor of Reproductive Science at the Institute for Women's Health at University College London. And it's a real pleasure to give you a talk today on the use of tech in fertility and infertility. My disclosures are that I'm partner in a company called the Embryology and PhD Academy, and we train embryologists who work in the clinical IVF laboratory. And I'm CEO and founder of a web-based forum called Global Women Connected. I am also very pleased that I'm author of a book called Your Fertile Years, which I've actually been writing for almost 33 years, and it's now in press with Sheldon, and it will be in hard copy early next year, but it's for pre-order now on Amazon. And my talk today is absolutely covered in my book as well. And I've done a number of studies on femtech with a couple of companies, Natural Cycles and Clearblue, and I've been paid by these companies to give talks over the last few years. So what I want to talk to you about today is fertility and infertility and how tech can be used. I'm going to talk about the menstrual cycle and the fertile window. And then on infertility, I'm going to talk about female fertility decline, fertility treatment, and just finish off talking about my view on the future of reproduction. So let's start with the menstrual cycle. Now, I started actually writing my book on the fertile years because when I started in this field back in 1987, I was really aware that my friends didn't understand how their menstrual cycle worked and certainly didn't understand about ovulation and about fertility. So what I want women to understand is that there's two key events in their menstrual cycle. I'm sure they all know about their period, but ovulation is the day that your eggs released, and this is your day of peak fertility. If we have been taught anything about fertility or our menstrual cycle, we might have got the textbook understanding that a menstrual cycle is normally 28 days and we ovulate in the middle around day 14, and we can see that represented here in this picture. And what we probably might not know is that actually anything between days 21 and 35 of a length of a menstrual cycle is actually considered normal. But I really questioned this 28-day cycle throughout the whole of my career. And a few years ago, I contacted the fertility and contraception app called Natural Cycles. I had been very aware they were one of the first apps to collect a huge amount of data on women's menstrual cycles. But they don't just look at the dates, which I'm going to come on to in a moment. They also measure a marker of ovulation. They actually measure basal body temperature. And I'll explain how that's linked to ovulation in the next slide. So I went to Natural Cycles and said, please, can we have a look at all your millions of data now on so many menstrual cycles from women? Let's have a look at these cycles and find out if this 28 days and day of ovulation on day 14 is really correct. And we found in this study, we looked at over 600,000 menstrual cycles, and we found that yes, for sure, 65% of cycles were around about 28 days. They were ranging from 25 to 30 days, but actually only 13% of the cycles we analysed had a 28-day cycle. And what was really surprising was ovulation was actually on average on day 17, not on day 14. Is that important? Well, it is, because the actual apps that people are using are telling people the textbook definition of our menstrual cycle and ovulation. And actually, this is information about how we can measure the fertile window. So the fertile window is the day of ovulation. That's the day, as I said, the egg is released. But the egg only lives for about 24 hours. It's only viable and can be fertilized and could get a woman pregnant for about 24 hours after ovulation. But we class the fertile window as 6 days, which is the 5 days before ovulation and the actual day of ovulation. And this is because sperm can exist in the female genital tract for up to 5 days. So if you're ovulating on day 17 and you have intercourse on day 12 of your cycle, the sperm can survive for those 5 days and you could still get pregnant. So I think this is really important for women to understand, whether they're trying to get pregnant or trying not to get pregnant. So what I really want to demonstrate in this slide is that if you're just looking at your dates, you could really miss things. Women in our study, some women ovulated as early as day 10 and some as late as day 26. And it's normally related to the length of their menstrual cycle. We're very much individual. We're not this 28-day textbook cycle with ovulation on day 14. So by just looking at the dates, our study with Natural Cycles showed that this was really an inaccurate way of predicting ovulation. There are three methods, are the main three. These are the main three methods that are used to be a marker of ovulation. Basal body temperature is what Natural Cycles use. And if a woman measures her temperature every day of her cycle, this is day 1 on the left, and day 30 on the right. Just around the time of ovulation, her basal body temperature goes slightly up. And this happens on the day of ovulation. So by measuring her cycle over several months, she can see the pattern and figure out when she is actually ovulating. So we call this basal body temperature. A woman can also check her cervical mucus. This is a little bit complicated. She really needs to be trained to show how to do this, but the consistency and the color of the cervical mucus changes through a woman's menstrual cycle, and especially there's specific changes around the time of ovulation. So this can tell us that ovulation is about to happen. And I think a very easy way is to use an ovulation stick. This measures a hormone called luteinizing hormone, and luteinizing hormone rises about 24 to 40 hours before a woman ovulates. So again, it's telling us that the woman is going to ovulate. So how can tech help us in our menstrual cycle and with regards to our fertile window? Well, I'm all for menstrual cycle and fertility apps. I am definitely a fan. Menstrual cycle apps are really useful in tracking our cycle and predicting our next cycle. They can help women who are suffering from premenstrual syndrome to be aware that their cycle's coming. Women that have irregular cycles, there might be something wrong, and this can help track those cycles and help a woman really understand about how her body's working. The problem I do have is that most menstrual cycle trackers also tell a woman the day she ovulates. And so as a result, they tell them their fertile window. And this is highly inaccurate unless they're measuring one of the markers of ovulation, as I showed you on the previous slide, such as temperature, cervical mucus, or luteinizing hormone. Then if we're just looking at dates, prediction of ovulation is highly inaccurate. So my issue with this is that if a woman's trying not to get pregnant, the app may be telling her she's ovulating and she thinks, oh, well, I've ovulated, I'm fine, I'm not at risk of getting pregnant anymore, so I can have unprotected sex. So if the app's saying she does this on day 14, day 15, etc., she may feel she could have unprotected sex and she might not be ovulating until day 17. So you could see that could result in unwanted pregnancies. But also for those couples trying to get pregnant, again, the app may be missing the fertile window. If she's ovulating on day 17, the app told her she's ovulating on day 14, she might totally miss the fertile window. So with Clear Blue, we've done a study that we haven't published yet, but we looked at these 10 very common, highly downloaded menstrual cycle apps, and we inputted data for 5 relatively fictitious women, but a woman with a constant 28-day cycle, a short cycle, woman 3 had an average of 28 days, but it did move. Woman 4 had long cycles, and women 5 had very irregular cycles, on average of 31 days. So if we look at this graph here, sorry, it's a bit complicated, but these are the first bunch of women 1, woman 2, 3, 4, 5. So really, we were inputting the same information into all 10 of these apps. And the important message from this is that these 10 apps for these 5 different fictitious women actually all predicted different days of ovulation. You can see here that really, if the apps were using the same algorithm to give this information, we'd expect all of these 5 for woman 1 to be the same, or for woman 2 to be the same. But we can see how varied these apps are, and none of them are accurate for day of ovulation. This app in the middle here, one of the apps didn't actually predict the day of ovulation, which I'm all for, unless we measure a marker of ovulation. So one app always put ovulation on day 13, this gray bar here, no matter how long the cycle was. The other apps really varied. And so the take-home message is that these apps are really good for helping you with your menstrual cycle dates and checking that your menstrual cycle is not doing anything odd or being very irregular, etc. Great for PMS. But I really wish that they didn't tell women the day they're ovulating if they haven't measured a mark of ovulation. Just looking at these dates is highly inaccurate. So please do not take this as correct information about ovulation. So whether you're trying to or not to get pregnant, this is not an accurate mark of ovulation. So earlier this year, we published our study on fertility apps. We looked at almost 100 apps, and there's a lot of information in that paper. It's freely accessible. And we looked at the ratings. These apps are rated pretty good from the women that are using them. But when we looked at what they are measuring, remember, these are marketing, or when you Google fertility apps, these are apps that came up in the search as a fertility app. And over half of them were only looking at dates. 39% were looking at dates plus basal body temperature, and sometimes plus other things such as luteinizing hormone, but mainly basal body temperature. 5% were looking at dates plus mucus plus sometimes something else, and just 1%, one of them, was looking at dates and just luteinizing hormone. So any of the three at the bottom, the BBT, mucus, or LH, are all measuring a marker of ovulation. So I think those are good apps to market as a fertility app, but these 54% would be very inaccurate for anyone who's trying to get pregnant. So dates only, when you're just looking at dates, it is an inaccurate. We need to measure a marker of ovulation to identify ovulation. So let's move on to infertility. Well, we have a major gender inequality with our fertility. A woman ovulates only 1 egg per month. She ovulates about 500 in her fertile years. A man, every time he ejaculates, on average, produces about 100 million sperm per ejaculate. So you can see there's a major gender inequality there in reproduction. I'm sure you could all think of some famous older dads. When I normally do this with an audience, George Clooney's normally the first one that they mention. We've had a few mentioned recently, Donald Trump. One thing all of these men have in common is a much younger partner. You can do this game with your friends later. Ask them to think of 5 older dads, and it won't take you long before you name 5. Saying 5 older mums is much, much harder. We've got a very few that I could have used as examples. One thing they all have in common is they've probably all had expensive fertility treatment. It's very unlikely that they got pregnant naturally at these ages. It does happen. There's always exception to the rule. You may well know somebody who did get pregnant naturally in their late 40s or early 50s, but it really, really is the exception. So we have a problem because the quantity and quality of a woman's eggs declines daily once she's gone through puberty, or even before puberty. Women are born with all the eggs we are going to have. We lose quite a lot when we're still a fetus. We have about 1 to 2 million potential eggs at birth. We have about 400,000 at puberty. The rest have just died. From puberty, we ovulate 1, but this is something many people don't know, that we lose up to 1,000 a month. So it's normally about 800 to 900, but it varies. Every woman's different. So we've got 400,000 at puberty. Remember, we're only going to ovulate about 500. So all those others are going to die at some time between puberty and the menopause. So by age 37, we've lost about 90% of our eggs. And by the menopause, they've all gone. But it's not just the quantity, it's also the quality. Eggs have very fragile chromosomes. I don't want to get technical about chromosomes, but we get 1 set from mum and 1 set from dad. And the ones in women we know can be quite abnormal. So what we see as a woman ages, these chromosomes become more confused, and we can have an increased risk of miscarriage, an increased risk of a chromosomally abnormal child, and a decreased chance of conception. So this is our classic graph that we always refer to in fertility. As a woman ages, this is her age down the bottom, but her fertility goes down, especially around the age of 35, and her risk of a miscarriage or spontaneous abortion will go up, again, especially becoming important around the age of 35. So my saying is evolution has not kept up with feminism. But this is the data we have globally. This is the most recent data. This is the mean age, so the average age women have the birth of their first child. If we look at all of these countries here, the white triangles are 1995 and the black, diamonds are 1970. So you can see from 1970 to 1995, the age of first birth has gone up in almost every country. And the blue columns are 2017. And again, you'll see this has gone up and getting very close in a number of countries to age 35. Number of countries here, growing number of countries, where the average age of first child is above the age of 30. And if we look at the total fertility rate, so this is the average number of children a woman would have in that country. When I was young, we used to say couples had 2.4 children. This has gone down globally. In the 1950s, globally it was 5, now it's 2.5. And in the EU, the average now is 1.6. So UK is 1.8, and we can see all of these countries here, it's 1.3, which is getting very close to just one child. And I'm sure you're all aware of the China one-child policy, and this has now been stopped because they didn't have enough young people to come in and sustain the country. So this leads to economic problems. What we're seeing is an increase in the number of couples not having the desired family size. And in the UK, we know that 20% of women past childbearing age are childless. And some will be by choice, but some will be by circumstance. Why are women delaying having children? Well, why not? We have a choice. We are now being more educated, having better careers, want to do other things. There's financial reasons. Two really important reasons are not found the right partner, or the partner will not commit. And women feel there's no rush. They see celebrities having children later and think, well, I don't need to rush. I can do what they're doing. A lot feel that assisted reproductive technology is the answer. This is mainly in vitro fertilization or test tube babies. And here's the world's first test tube baby, Louise Brown. She was born in 1978. And this is us on her birthday year. She had a very busy year a couple of years ago, celebrating her 40th birthday. But it's all about the egg. So even with fertility treatment, this is data from the UK governing body, the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority. And this is their latest data that shows the birth rate per embryo transferred. And they collect all the data for the under 35s together, because it's not a huge difference if you're 34 or 28. But once you get over 35 or over, your chance of getting pregnant by fertility treatment really rapidly declines. And around age 44, the chance is just a few percent, and no clinic, no data anywhere will go above 45, because the chance of having a child by fertility treatment with your own egg at 45 is really zero. But if we look at donor eggs, so if you use an egg from a woman who's under 35 years of age, no matter what age you are, your live birth rate is around about the same. So it just shows it's all about the egg. And these are two women who had a donor egg and successfully carried their own children. So the womb stays relatively fertile, but the egg doesn't. So is egg freezing the answer? So egg freezing is where we can take the eggs from a woman when she's of a more fertile age, ideally, in my view, around the age of 30 and not much beyond that. We can freeze the eggs and put her fertility on hold, and she could then do other things and hopefully return to these eggs in the future and have the egg of a younger woman, in effect, her own eggs. I call this plan B, not plan A. I think we need to make sure that we have good fertility education. And I really don't want to see the graduation present to our daughters to be rush off to the IVF clinic to freeze your eggs. It's expensive. You need to have multiple rounds, in my view. If you collect 10 eggs when you're 28 and 10 eggs when you're 38, we can't tell which of them are going to be good, but chances are at 38, which is actually the average age women freeze their eggs in the UK, those 10 eggs are going to be much more lower quality and have chromosome abnormalities than the 10 eggs when you were 28. So it's no guarantee, even if you freeze them when you're 28, there's no guarantee they can result in a baby. And we have regulations in many countries. And in the UK, we have a 10-year time limit at the moment that we're hopefully going to get overturned soon, so that that will make it a lot fairer. But I still call it Plan B. Plan A, I think, should be natural conception. I went through years of fertility treatment, and I don't want people to end up in a fertility clinic as I did. I want people to have natural conception if they can. But it's certainly an option that we need to discuss. So to finish off, I just want to talk about some of the technology in assisted reproduction. I've first published on these over 10 years ago. There's a number of technologies that we've now termed IVF adjuncts or IVF add-ons. So we have our routine fertility cycle, and sometimes clinics add on treatments. But if we're adding on these treatments, we are claiming that they're going to improve your chance of having a baby. And this is from the Human Fertilization and Embryology website. I'm part of the committee that's looked at all of these add-ons, and we have done a very systematic review of the data, the studies that have looked at this. And the gold standard study is the randomized controlled trial. And the randomized controlled trial is a study where one group doesn't have the treatment, doesn't have the add-on, and the other group does. And then at the end of the studies, you look to see, was the live birth rate the same in both groups, in the control and the treatment? So we gave the add-ons a traffic light system. It's green if the data shows that it does improve live birth rate. It's amber if it doesn't yet, but there's some data, it might be conflicting, but it's not yet really been confirmed. And red means there's no data, either because studies haven't been done or the studies have been done and they don't show any benefit of having this procedure. So this has been highly controversial. These are my two most recent papers looking at this technology. So we're going to hear about some of the technology today. So it'd be good to remember that we might hear technology that sounds really fantastic and is going to really improve things, but we need to do the proper robust studies, the randomized controlled trials, to be sure that this really is a benefit to patients. So taking all of this on board, I've been really interested in fertility education, as I said, since 1987. And in 2016, we set up a group called the UK Fertility Education Initiative. We worked with a number of partners to set this up, and it's headed by myself, Adam Balin, and Jackie Boven. And we've published a number of papers. We've made some animations you'll find on YouTube. I've done some work with the wonderful Jessica Hepburn and Gabby Vortner on looking at how we could educate young people about our messages. And we looked at theatrical and visual arts. And really importantly, we finally got the words reproductive health and fertility in the UK curricula. So we're really glad that this will now be taught in schools. And then I head an international fertility education campaign. We developed a fertility education poster. We've got a multidisciplinary team from around the world. We've translated the poster into about 30 languages, and we are now working with a number of different countries to develop their fertility education, both websites, getting it in the curriculum, doing research, etc. So to finish off, how will we make our future children? When I've talked about a few of these, such as freezing eggs, we've also got people using surrogacy, we've got same-sex couples having children now. And in the near future bubbling under, something that I talk about a lot is using genetic testing to decide which is going to be the healthiest embryo. Maybe around the corner, we might be able to make eggs from stem cells, such as from some cells from our skin, which would totally override the problem of female fertility decline. And then in Brave New World, Aldous Huxley in 1932 talked about a world where we make all the babies in the lab and we don't even carry them. We even have an artificial womb that will carry our child. So we're not sure when or if any of these will come in, but they're certainly bubbling under. So our take-home messages are: make informed choices. We need to work on fertility education, and women need to decide, men and women need to decide if they want children. And if they do, in my view, women have got three options. They should start trying now and ideally know when they are ovulating. They could wait until they feel they're ready, but they need to be informed and understand about fertility decline. And there is an option of freezing their eggs, plan B, remember, not plan A. So this is my social media at Prof. Joyce Harper, and I'd look forward to any questions. Thank you very much.
This COVID world. I've just been told that we're going live in 10 seconds. So I am hoping, oh, I've been told to put my camera on. I think I've got my camera on. I think I've got my camera on. And we're live. I just want to thank Joyce for that fantastic presentation. I think it's so important to hear the basics of fertility and also the developments in technology. You know, because actually what I find in the work that I do is that so many people, you know, don't know, we're never taught the basics, don't know the basics. And I also mean people who work in the profession, you know. I think so it's so important. Unfortunately, I think we're running late now, so we're going to have to press on and not have a Q&A. And I'm going to introduce our next speaker. And our next speaker is Andrea Trego. Now, Andrea is truly a fertility inspiration. She is a past TEDx speaker, and if you haven't seen her TED Talk, I highly recommend it. She has combined her own fertility experience with her professional experience as a nurse to improve accessibility to fertility support through the foundation of the Enhanced Fertility Program app. Which is what she's going to be talking to us about today. It's an evidence-based approach to femtech, and she is going to specifically be talking about how she believes a digital approach to improving fertility health worldwide can work. Over to you, Andrea.
Hello, welcome to Giant Health. My name is Andrea Trego. I'm a fertility nurse consultant, and today I would like to talk to you about a digital approach to improving fertility health worldwide. Well, the World Health Organization has declared infertility a global public health issue affecting 1 in 6 couples worldwide with significant burden to populations. And the World Health Organization has called for a greater emphasis on innovative, safe, and cost-effective solutions. Solutions that improve accessibility to fertility health. Accessibility not only in terms of physical accessibility, but also economic accessibility and information accessibility. There's a call for solutions that increase awareness and knowledge, solutions that incorporate the biopsychosocial perspective and the wider determinants that impact on patients' experience of fertility problems, and also solutions that are patient outcome driven. During this talk, I will share how my journey as a nurse and fertility patient has inspired me to find a solution to make fertility education, support, and care accessible for all. Starting with an idea to developing a product, validating with research, and finally helping so many patients worldwide find the information, support, and clinical care that they need. But I would like to start by telling you a bit about myself and why I'm so passionate about this topic. Well, I am a fertility nurse and a senior lecturer, but I was actually diagnosed with infertility when I was very young at the age of 17. And it was my experience of going through this challenging diagnosis that prompted me and inspired me to be involved in everything that I'm doing today. Eventually, I was invited to be a TED Talk speaker, and I have founded the Enhanced Fertility Program, which has received a few awards along the way, and that's what I am bringing you here today. I would like to start from the beginning. I would like to start by reflecting on what fertility health is, because it's so much more than the absence of disease. Fertility health is a complete physical, mental, and social well-being. It implies that people are able to have a satisfying and safe sex life, and that they have the capability to reproduce and the freedom to decide if, when, and how often to do so. I think it's also important to highlight that reproductive rights are human rights. And this began to develop as a subset of human rights at the United Nations 1968 International Conference on Human Rights. It recognizes the basic rights of all couples and individuals free of discrimination, their ability to decide freely and responsibly the number, spacing, the timing of their children, and to have the information and the means to do so, and the right to attain the highest standard of sexual and reproductive health. So, who are we and how did I make this happen? Well, the Enhanced Fertility Program is an exciting and revolutionary digital program that makes fertility education, support, and care accessible to all patients. It is my mission and the mission of my team to increase accessibility to fertility support and care worldwide. We want patients to find the fertility treatment and care they need when they need it, and we want them to feel supported along the way. We want them to have access to trustworthy, evidence-based information and support, and we strive with making them feel informed, hopeful, and supported when trying to conceive. Our journey started in 2018 when we had this idea and developed our initial Enhanced Fertility Program. We launched it at the Fertility Show in Manchester, and we were able to get feedback from 80 patients. Their feedback allowed us to improve the service further, and in 2019, we were accepted into London South Bank University Business Program. Here, we had the opportunity to learn more about the product and how we could reach our patients' needs. We ended up doing a very interesting clinical trial where we got more information about we could perfect the Enhanced Fertility Program. We also ended up collaborating with Mumsnet in a clinical research where our patients used the Enhanced Fertility Program for 3 months. And finally, in 2019, 2020, we took the program to 5 clinics who embraced this journey of offering support during fertility treatments. And finally, this year, we were able to reach many more patients worldwide. Our goal is to make fertility education and support accessible for all. The Enhanced Fertility Program has an online course with 5 modules: understanding fertility, conception and treatment, nutrition and hydration, physical activity, habits and environmental factors, managing emotions. You also have access to 22 evidence-based interventions, 15 mindfulness recordings, cognitive behavioral therapy exercises, monthly support groups, access to consultations with nurses and psychologists worldwide, and access to special group sessions. Patients can access the Enhanced Fertility Program through our website, efp.clinic, or by downloading the app through the App Store or Google Play Store. Our pillars are to learn, to provide evidence-based information to our patients' fingertips, to transform, to find ways to optimize their fertility, to support connecting them with clinicians who can help them physically and emotionally, and also to connect with others who are going through similar journeys. Here are a few screenshots of what the app looks like. In the first image, we have a fertility self-assessment questionnaire to give patients an idea of what they can focus on whilst they are using the app. Then you have here an image of what a typical lesson within the online course looks like. We always have a short video and text and references at the bottom. The third image is an example of what one of our mindfulness recordings looks like. For example, mindfulness for the 2-week wait. Here we have 3 examples of our CBT exercises. These have been proven to be so popular with our users. Patients can download these CBT exercises, complete them, and then they can discuss their exercises with our clinicians. Here we have the accessibility to a monthly support group, which is free. We have consultations with professionals all over the world, and we have wellness circles, which are mini programs on specific topics that patients might want to explore. For example, communication and relationships, New Year, new plan, or for example, when should I consider egg, sperm, and embryo donation? Or fertility for the LGBTQIA community, or life beyond infertility, or pregnancy after fertility treatment. It's important that we have these mini programs available for patients who want to explore these topics. And patients can also connect with different clinics that we are already collaborating with, either through our website or from inside the app. Here's what we found so far. We found that fertility patients do become very literate over time, but in the beginning of the journey, they are not well informed or educated about fertility or conception. Patients seek basic information in the beginning of the journey, and they seek more advanced information as the journey advances. We've also learned that patients take the information that has been provided by their doctors and clinicians, and they turn to social media for validation and feedback, and then they return to the clinic to make their decision. So 50% of decision-making by patients is actually happening online. About social media, we've learned that patients spend on average 2 hours and 23 minutes a day. And patients are seeking information and support, but they are concerned whether the information they are getting is actually trustworthy. In terms of Google, we know that patients spend on average 30 minutes before deciding to contact a clinic, but can they find you? About the program, we've learned that patients appreciate the biopsychosocial support, the information in easy terms, the consistency and layout of how the information is curated to them, the connection with others, the accessibility and the minimal cost of the consultations. We found that patients felt more supported, that they improved their ability to cope with treatment, that they highly recommended the service to others in similar journeys, and that after a 3-month follow-up, patients continued engaged with the content they were getting. We have also been receiving a lot of good feedback and reviews from different patients, which is available on Trustpilot. And we're lucky enough that we have several patients worldwide downloading the app, and this number is increasing every day. So why do fertility clinics want to partner with in-house fertility program? Well, we offer fertility clinics 3 things. We offer them a ready-to-go strategy to support your current patients, to nurture those patients that are already within your care. You have this ability to improve your patients' education and experience. By nurturing your existing patients, they will feel emotionally ready to carry on with further treatment, even when things get tough. And they will refer your clinic to others in similar circumstances. Secondly, we are offering clinics a ready-to-go content strategy with written, audio, video on social media channels that exposes your clinic to a large community of new patients, allowing you to create brand awareness and lead generation. And finally, we are offering clinics the ability to participate in our social research. So how can you engage with us? The first step is to schedule a call. We want to understand how we can help you develop a patient experience, support, and engagement strategy that works for you. We also want to understand what kind of patients you want to attract and what kind of services you are offering. Step number 2 is to enroll in our free pilot program. Here you will get to experience the Enhanced Fertility Program. And step 3 is about you making a choice of whether you want to continue and finally make that final step of being part of our team. This is the team behind the scenes making it all happen. We also collaborate with other nurses, psychologists, and experts worldwide to provide support to patients wherever they are. So are you ready to partner with us? Well, get in touch. Whilst they were having fertility treatment.
And that's great. So this really is a global app, because do you, I mean, obviously, this is a UK conference, I believe, although probably there might be visitors from around the world. Do you feel that fertility is going to become more and more international?
I think so. There is already so many patients going to different countries for treatment. And I know the coronavirus pandemic has been a real struggle for clinics as well as for patients, but I think it's global. I think it's not realistic to expect every country in the world to have the same reproductive regulations and laws. So yeah, we just need to make the best out of the situation as patients and as clinicians as well, because I need to find the treatment that
Andrea, I think we're having some technical problems now because we're getting a lot of playback. So I think we probably ought to come to the end of this this Q&A. I don't know how you're doing. Are you getting the playback?
A little bit.
Yeah, I've got double voice here, so I can't hear you. Oh. Right. I don't know what to do now, because are you still there, Andrea?
I'm here, Jessica.
This is an adventure. Let us call this an adventure in technology. I'm getting a message here saying that people can hear us, but I think we are about to go on to our next talk anyway. Is there anything else that you would like to say before we finish, Andrea?
Well, if anyone has any questions, they can get in touch with me, andrea@efp.clinic. We also have a stand here at Giant Health. We're having some technical problems accessing it, but if we're not there, it's not because we're not trying. Just send us an email at andrea@efp.clinic and we will get in touch with you.
Yeah. And I'd just like to say, as a former fertility patient, I really, really hope that any fertility clinics out there watching do take up the app, because I think this will really, really improve the experience for their patients. So thank you, Andrea, very much. And we'll see you soon. And she is going to be talking to us about how AI is impacting fertility outcomes. Michelle is an internationally renowned expert in health and medical research. She's an academic and a researcher, and she's also an entrepreneur. In fact, she has recently been named the South Australian Percy Entrepreneur of the year 2020, the year of COVID. She is the co-founder and CEO of Precision, which is an AI health company, and she's going to be talking to us today about their first commercial product, which is called the Life Whisperer, which aims to improve embryo selection in laboratories. And for any IVF patient, this is such an important part of the process. I learned very quickly as an IVF patient myself that the embryologist was one of the most important people in the process, because they looked after and selected your embryos. And Michelle is another of our speakers who has been on her own fertility journey. And I would venture to think that it is that has driven her to be so passionate about proving IVF outcomes. Over to Michelle.
Hi everyone, my name's Michelle Perugini and I'm really pleased to be speaking to you today at the Giant Health Conference about artificial intelligence and how we use it to create scalable healthcare products and some of the challenges that are holding the industry back, as well as a case study in fertility talking about how AI is positively impacting fertility outcomes globally. I'm the CEO of a company called Precision. We're an AI healthcare company. We have a global first mission, and our reason for being is to create scalable AI healthcare products that can improve women's healthcare outcomes globally. When we talk about artificial intelligence, what's really interesting to know is that globally connected, diverse data can produce the world's most powerful, unbiased and scalable AI. But what I want to do is step through some of the challenges to actually getting that data and some of the things that are holding AI back in the healthcare sector. But why do we care about bringing technology to healthcare? It's quite simple. Clinicians are making critical decisions on behalf of their patients in very time-poor environments. And they're the primary caregivers. They have an inability within the time of a consult to be able to make those critical decisions and trawl through very large historical data sets to make the best decision. And for patients, it's about better outcomes, lower cost, and increasing transparency of treatment. And what technology like AI can do is actually improve efficiency of clinical decisioning. It can create clinical decision support to the extent that it can improve accuracy of diagnoses and drive those better patient outcomes whilst helping the clinicians make those decisions in those time-poor environments. And when we look at AI healthcare as a sector, it's an enormous sector already, and it's having a massive impact on various parts of the healthcare sector. But one of the interesting facts is that for $35 billion of spend in AI, there's a return, a health economic return of around 150 billion. That's around a 5-fold return. And so that talks to the incredible efficiency that AI can provide within the clinical environment. Some of the places where AI is currently being used in healthcare is for personalised medicine, for example, trawling through very large data sets of genetic data for different individuals and trying to understand how those individuals respond to new drug treatments or their prognosis, likely prognosis for different diseases. In the pharmaceutical sector, AI is being used a lot. It's a really growing field in terms of in silico drug discovery, trying to identify drug targets without having to empirically test them all. You can trawl through many thousands in a computer model simulation. And diagnostics is the area where we work in as a company, really providing clinical decision support to the extent that we can help doctors to make better clinical decisions using AI. So what's holding back AI in healthcare? One of the main challenges is these AI products are typically not scaling well. And healthcare is a global problem, which means it needs a global AI solution. And if it's not being built right, then the AI can be quite biased, brittle, and very unreliable. So what do we need to build globally scalable AI products? It's quite counterintuitive, actually. Many believe that solving the right data problem is about getting more data, and that will solve scalability and accuracy performance issues. But it's actually not the case. It's not about more data. It's about the right data. And that right data needs to be globally diverse. So we need to train AI on data that represents different patient demographics and different clinical settings if you want that AI to be able to apply out in a scalable way to different clinics around the world. But obviously, collecting that globally diverse data set is challenging in the healthcare sector for 3 reasons. There are data privacy laws that prevent the movement and centralisation of global data outside of the country of origin for AI training. So it's very difficult to get all the data that's locked up in those different clinical environments to be able to centralise it and build an AI model effectively. Clinical collaboration is another reason. Data is locked up in many clinics that are distributed all around the world, and they know that that data has value and they don't necessarily want to give it away for free. And data quality. Clinical data is inherently poor quality, but only 1% of poor quality data can significantly impact AI scalability and accuracy. So we need to be able to solve these challenges in order to build scalable AI. So our approach at Prestgen has been a fundamental paradigm shift in the way that scalable AI healthcare products are built, essentially to make them out of the box and translatable to different clinical environments around the world. And we have a global cloud platform to do this that allows us to collaborate with clinics all around the world and allows them to contribute their data locally in a very safe and secure way. We also have a royalty-based incentive model where we incentivize clinics globally to contribute their data so that we can build scalable AI products, and they then receive a royalty once those products are commercialized. And in terms of the data privacy and safety, we have a really unique federated learning system that sits on our cloud platform that instead of centralizing all that data from all around the world, we actually send our AI out to train locally on the data that's distributed globally. And it gains that collective intelligence as if it had been trained on a central data set. And automated data cleaning. This is really interesting. We have a very unique algorithm that can automatically detect and remove poor quality data that is going to impact the accuracy of the training of the AI. So what I want to talk about now is the femtech sector. This is a sector that we're really focused on, improving women's health outcomes. It's a largely underserved market, but it's a huge global market that's really growing. And one of the interesting things about femtech is that there's a lot of synergies between the different subsectors of women's health, including, you know, across from fertility to obstetrics and gynecology, even into female incident cancers, which often involve female reproductive organs. But what I want to talk about today is Life Whisperer, which is our first product in the fertility sector that's looking at embryo assessment during the IVF process. Why do we care about IVF? Well, it's a huge growing problem globally. There's around 200 million infertile couples worldwide, and the actual process of IVF is extremely traumatic and stressful for patients, and it's quite financially constraining as well. And despite the technology having been around for over 40 years, IVF success rates are still quite low at around 20%. And one of the really important things about IVF is the end point where you end up having embryos to select from. Selecting that embryo to transfer to the patient is critical to a successful pregnancy outcome. So what we are doing is we are using technology to try and improve that process. So this is what is currently being done in the IVF laboratories. Eggs are retrieved from a female recipient or patient, and they're fertilized with sperm in a culture dish. Those fertilized eggs are then allowed to develop into embryos over a period of 5 days. And as I said, at that day 5 point, the clinician or the embryologist needs to select the very best embryo that is going to ensure that a pregnancy can result for the patient, because they're only transferring one. And how they currently do this is through manual visual inspection through a microscope and a very simple grading system. It's quite subjective and obviously limited to what the eye can see. Or there's genetic screening, which is quite invasive and requires cutting out part of the developing embryo for a full genetic test. And that only tells us about the genetic integrity of the embryo, not the likelihood of a pregnancy resulting. So what we have done is we have created an AI that has been built collaboratively with and for clinics globally on a global clinical data set. We've trained our AI actually on almost 20,000 images from day 5 embryos where we knew whether a pregnancy resulted or not. And the AI has then learned the features that are associated with either good or poor embryos and the pregnancy outcome that is likely to result. And this particular product is already now approved in 2/3 of the world's IVF market. And we've demonstrated scale, and we've got initial users in 5 countries. Of course, the product has been clinically tested extensively. We've got a published clinical study which took in 12 international clinics, very, very high profile clinics across Asia, Australia, New Zealand, and also the US. And what we showed is that compared to that manual visual assessment, Life Whisperer was actually 25% more accurate at being able to determine whether an embryo would go on to give rise to a pregnancy. And what this means in real numbers is that it's a 15% decrease in the time to pregnancy for patients, according to our study. And this actually saves, on average for patients, $2,000 per IVF treatment cycle, because on average, they're needing to go through fewer treatment cycles. And for clinics, it actually provides a revenue increase of around $5,000, because the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th cycles of IVF for a given patient are charged at a much lower rate than the first IVF treatment cycle. So to create efficiencies and improve success rates for clinics, it's really a very good revenue opportunity for them to be able to get more patients pregnant quicker through that process. And we're starting to see now the very first babies being born as a result of having used Life Whisperer AI embryo assessment during their embryo selection process. And in fact, this week, we've just released the very first baby that has been born in Australia from the Life Whisperer product, which is really exciting. And for patients, this is an amazing ability of technology to really improve what is a very traumatic process for them. So the way that when I talk about scalability of AI earlier in the talk, what I was talking about is being able to build products that could be delivered into different clinical environments very cheaply, very rapidly, and without continuous AI training and development. And so because we've been able to create such a scalable AI product with Life Whisperer, we can deliver it for very low cost to patients, because that product can be delivered all around the world. And for clinics, we actually don't even charge them online access or any licensing or subscription fees. It's just a simple pay-per-use model for the patient that the clinic can either pass on to the patient or embed in the overall costs of the IVF treatment. And for the clinics to set up, it can be done in minutes. The system is a very simple drag and drop of the embryo images onto the web-based application, and the score that Life Whisperer gives that relates to the likelihood of a pregnancy resulting happens in around 10 seconds. There's no other annotations of the images. There's nothing that the clinician or embryologist needs to do other than to drag and drop the patient embryos onto the system and let the analysis happen. And that score then guides them as to which embryo to transfer. And what we're interested in now is applying AI across the whole IVF process. And so I talked today about embryo viability assessment, which is really exciting and has already been used to impact patients globally. But our second product, which is due to be released next year, in the first half of next year, is actually looking at non-invasive genetic assessment of embryos. Just using the embryo images and AI, we have shown that we can identify genetic abnormalities within the embryos. And what this allows us to do is provide a genetic pre-screen for patients that don't elect to do PGTA testing, or we can provide a pre-screen that allows the clinicians to choose which embryos they should send for PGTA testing. So this is really exciting product. And we're also looking at other applications within the fertility or IVF process, including oocyte assessment, which is the precursor to the embryo, and also sperm assessment. And beyond the IVF process, we're looking at other application areas within the femtech sector, including endometriosis. So I'll finish there and just say thank you so much for having me speak at this conference today. I'm really excited about hearing any questions that you have during the Q&A session. And if anyone would like to reach out to me, we're on social media, or you can go to our website and get the details. Thank you so much.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Michelle, how are you? This is Jessica. Can you see me?
I can see you and I can hear you, Jessica. Great to speak with you.
Yes, I'm like hoping that the technology is working. We've had some real problems. I did actually manage to get to see most of your talk, whereas the other ones I haven't seen at all, which has been a bit of a problem in putting questions together. Right, how are we doing? All good. I think we're going live now. I hope. Can our producer give us the thumbs up that we are live, please? We're learning how to use this technology. And the moment I get a sign to say that we are live, I am going to be delighted to be interviewing Michelle. Michelle, how do I pronounce your surname? Perugini.
Perugini.
Such a lovely name. We are live now. We are live now. Hello, everyone. This is Jessica Hepburn, the host and chair of the fertility track. We've just had our third talk this morning by Dr. Michelle Perugini. I hope I pronounced her name correctly, who is the co-founder of Pressagen. I wasn't quite sure, Michelle, how to pronounce that either. You've got beautiful sounding names of your companies. Is that right? Pressagen.
Yes.
And this is much easier. The first commercial product of it is the Life Whisperer, which is this amazing AI technology that is helping embryologists select embryos in the lab. Can I start before we sort of delve a little deeper into the talk that you just gave, Michelle? When I introduced you, I don't know whether you managed to see my introduction with the technology. I did say that I believe that you have a fertility story yourself. Is that what's driven you to develop these products?
That's certainly true, and it's certainly what's driven my passion around this first product. But I do come from a long kind of history of healthcare background in terms of my academic background as well. But you're right, when I was trying to conceive my first child, it didn't come naturally, and there was no particular reason for that, no family history, no medical reason, just the fact that we were trying for a very long time and it wasn't happening, and we tried all sorts of fertility treatments. And I guess what it did is gave me an appreciation of how terrible that feeling is when, you know, a lifelong decision like that is kind of taken out of your hands, and you know, where you're really reliant on what is a fairly, you know, not necessarily a completely scientific approach to try and help with that process. It's a really stressful and traumatic journey for patients.
Absolutely. So you had that terrible diagnosis that I had as well, which isn't a diagnosis, which is unexplained infertility. Did you?
I had, in the end, I had kind of borderline polycystic ovaries. Right, so I had cysts all over my ovaries, but they didn't think that was the reason, but there was no other particular reason. And yeah, it was just, I think a lot of the blame gets passed to the patient. You know, maybe you're working too much, maybe there's too much stress, you know, perhaps you need to change your diet or your exercise regimes. And it's a lot of kind of blame and very little kind of evidence base behind that process, and it's very difficult.
Absolutely. And one of the things that I really thought was brilliant about your talk, if you don't mind me saying, Michelle, is that you came out with this statistic, which is, you know, I think people think that IVF is a magic bullet and that it's going to work every time for everyone. And actually, although the statistics have improved massively since Louise Brown was born just over 40 years ago, the first IVF baby, the sort of, I mean, you quoted 20%, which is even lower than I think that the statistics are in the UK. I think for all cycles it's running around 25%, but the maximum success rate is in the early 30s. And I thought it was brilliant that you shared that with us. And obviously this technology that you're developing is really aiming to improve that.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. The expectation when you're an infertile patient, you think, well, there's these amazing technologies available to me, IVF, and, you know, surely then I'll go through that process and I'll come home with a baby. And I think one of the challenges, and we've done a lot of, you know, through development of our products, we've done a lot of patient engagement actually and tried to understand what some of the challenges of the patients are in that process. And actually the biggest one is transparency is their biggest issue. And it's not actually the fact that, you know, because early on we thought, well, if they're getting kind of a grade or a score around their embryo, it might make them feel terrible if it's a low scoring embryo. It's actually not the case. What they want is to actually manage their expectations around a likely outcome. And the worst thing for a patient is when the doctor is telling you that you have a beautiful embryo and then you don't end up getting pregnant and there's no reason why. That's the worst case. So I think transparency is really important, and I think it's important for patients to understand, you know, where they're at in that journey and have some sort of evidence or discussion points or some sort of objective measures to base their expectations.
Oh, Michelle, I agree with that so much. And one of the things that I always say is that, like, what makes a good fertility clinic for a patient, you know, ultimately isn't necessarily whether they come out with a baby or not. You know, actually, you're absolutely right. If you feel that you have had good care and your expectations have been managed well, exactly as you say, so that, you know, not least so that you can move on to other options if you need to. That is actually what good fertility healthcare looks like to me, and I think for many. So can we drill down a little bit further into your AI technology? Because you spoke, obviously, traditionally the embryologist looked at the embryos under the microscope and took a view as to which was going to be the most successful, but that wasn't based on anything other than their eye, really, and experience. And then sort of following that came these things, you know, the embryoscope that took 24-hour footage of your embryo, and that was supposed to improve selection. But your technology, if I understand it correctly, goes one step further, does it? It puts all this into a system with all the other data of you know, millions of embryos presumably, to be able to select them. Can you just, in layperson's terms, talk that through exactly how it works a bit in more detail?
Yeah, I guess you're right. Our technology goes one step further to compared to those other kind of embryo grading technologies. And what we're doing is looking at using AI, training on tens of thousands of historical embryo images. And ours is the only system that has been trained on embryos where they have been transferred to a patient in a single embryo transfer, and where we know whether a pregnancy resulted or not. And the reason that that's important is because it means that our algorithm has learnt the features that are associated with a pregnancy outcome, not necessarily just growth milestones, which are important and potentially somewhat predictive, but we're actually predicting pregnancy outcome through analysing or training our AI algorithm to look at all these images of past cases where it knows whether a pregnancy resulted or not. And essentially all it does is it learns the features that relate to a good or a poor embryo and everything in between, and it gives a confidence value around new embryo images that it analyses, and it kind of compares them to that historical benchmark. And so one of the really amazing things about AI is that it's completely objective. It's not, you know, it's not requiring any sort of it's based on knowledge that it's gained. It's not It's not requiring any subjective measurements. It's not requiring the embryologist to annotate the images or put in any other preconceived kind of scoring. It's a true objective measure of that embryo. And so, you know, it's not a replacement for those other technologies. We like to think of it as another piece of information that can guide that embryo assessment process. Yeah. And obviously, as humans, we're limited to what our eye can see down the microscope. So, of course, technology can help to improve that process.
Presumably the more clinics that get involved, I mean, the better the data is going to become, and the more hopefully successful outcomes there will be. I mean, is that the aim?
That's absolutely the aim, and it's entirely why we have this collaborative clinic model. We have clinic collaborators all around the world. We never build a product without many, many clinical collaborators, so that we get that diversity of data that I talked about, which is really important, because if you can't build these AI products for scale, if you can't build them to meet the needs of different clinical environments, then what ends up happening is becomes very expensive to deliver, and that cost then needs to be either borne by the clinics or passed on to the patients. And so it's all for us, it's all about that global clinical collaboration, get the right data, build AI that's scalable, deliver it at low cost so it's affordable and accessible for patients anywhere.
That's amazing. So I mean, you've developed I know you're based in Australia, and you've developed that technology there, presumably, but it's worldwide. I mean, I presume you're aware in this country, in the UK, our regulator, the HFEA, the Human Fertilisation and Embryology Authority, has developed this traffic light system around new technologies in fertility healthcare, and that traffic light system is really based on where those technologies are in terms of have they undergone clinical trials, randomized controlled clinical trials. Where does your technology sit in terms of it? I mean, I know that you say it's been approved in two-thirds of the IVF market, so it's safe to use, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's been through those trials yet, has it, or has it?
I guess one of the things to understand is that, you know, not to say that randomized control trials aren't a good means of testing, but these type of approaches of AI for embryo assessment, for example, are not designed to be used as standalone tools. And so it's actually quite difficult to test them in an RCT setting. Right. They're designed to be clinical decision support. And the way that you test them is by assessing their predictive power against actual real world data, where you find out what the pregnancy outcomes were, and then you assess how predictive the algorithm was at predicting that outcome. So randomized control trials are one approach to test that, but it's kind of an outdated approach, and it's not the only approach to test these types of products. And of course, in the fertility sector, it's actually really difficult to do an effective clinical study, because you don't have the benefit of being able to transfer every embryo within a given patient cohort. You only get the chance of doing one and then tracking that embryo through. So I guess it's something that we're considering, but what we have done is extensive international clinical studies on retrospective data that has been collected, so we can absolutely assess the predictive power of our algorithm, which is the most important thing. We can assess the sensitivity and how well it predicted the outcome. We've also got many clinics that are using the technology now, and those results stack up in real use, which is the important metric. And in terms of the HFEA, we've actually had really good engagement with the HFEA. And I think one of the things that they're trying to do is broaden their scope and understanding of these new age technologies that don't really fit their current criteria. And so they're well aware of it.
And I actually think what you've just said is really, really important and interesting, and I wish we had more time to discuss this, Michelle, because it's something I'm really interested in. I think maybe, you know, in part that traffic light system evolved because, you know, many patients are put into positions where that they feel that they need to pay for costly, like what was described here as add-on treatments, you know, that haven't necessarily been proven, and they're trying to sort of make the information clearer for patients. But so I would just, as a sort of final question, then say, would it be, I mean, better to encourage clinics not to actually include this in their practice and in their packages rather than using them as add-on prices for patients? Would that be a sort of fairer approach, perhaps?
Well, I mean, we do have a lot of clinics that do that embed, because our solution is relatively cheap, comparable to the overall treatment cycle. We do have a lot of clinics that embed it and use it for every patient that comes through their clinic door because they see the value. But then there's some other clinics that prefer to charge an add-on to the patient. And either way, our view is that it's a relatively small cost to potentially save that patient an additional treatment cycle. So it's a massive value to the patient. But I would say, with the HFEA traffic light system, things like PGTA don't really fit in there. It's given a red in that system because it doesn't fit the traditional testing metric. Same with the time-lapse imaging technology, that's got an amber on the system, doesn't really fit with the current testing paradigm. So I think there's going to be a process of renewal of that system, and clinics shouldn't exclude technologies because of that traffic light system. They should look at the evidence base and clinical studies that have been done.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you. I think it's so important that we have these conversations, because ultimately I think what we're all working towards is an environment where fertility patients have better outcomes. And I certainly really enjoyed listening to your presentation, and I feel that this is the future. This absolutely is the future. And I said, I don't know if you heard in my introduction, that you realize as a fertility patients that your embryologists and the work that they're doing in the lab with your embryos are some of the most important people, if not the most important people, as part of the process. So anything that technology can do to help them make those decisions seems to me a brilliant thing. So thank you, Michelle, very much for joining us, and I hope that our paths cross again soon.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Right, people, fertility giant health people out there. We're now on to our next speaker, I believe, who is Josh Rackshaw now. Yes, I'm just getting a sign to introduce Josh. I'm about to introduce you indeed. So Josh is the product owner at Fenomatch, which is a company dedicated to improving the donor selection process for IVF patients. So that's donor sperm, donor eggs, donor gametes, donor embryos. Josh is going to tell us in detail how this works in his company. But what I will say before he starts is that this is a technology that is currently being used by over 100 clinics worldwide, and it has created over 7,500 families, which is amazing. He's going to be the title of his talk is AI Phenotype Matching for IVF Patients and Donors. Over to you, Josh, and I look forward to chatting to you afterwards.
Hello, everybody. This is Josh from Phenomatch. Thank you to Laura Biggs for helping to organize this. Thank you to Jessica for hosting these talks. And thanks to everyone who's watching. I know how busy and complicated everything is at the moment, so I really appreciate your time. I want to start by showing a question. And it's a question that will be familiar to anybody in a couple who's considered fertility treatment with egg or sperm donation. And the question is, will our baby look like us? This is a fairly natural question to ask. It's a common worry. We know that patients think about it a lot. And Phenomatch was born to try and help. And the way that we help is by providing AI facial matching with objective analysis of the facial resemblance between the donor and the recipient, or the recipient's partner. When we do this facial matching, we focus on traits which are phenotypic, the ones which are passed on to our children via DNA. And of course, our goal here is to increase the degree of facial resemblance between parents and donor-assisted children. So if you're a heterosexual couple or a homosexual couple and you're looking for a donor, either sperm or egg donation, you can go to one of the clinics that we work with and they will take a photograph of your face, and our algorithm will analyze 12,000 data points to build essentially a map, and the map is compared to the potential donors, and then your doctor gets a list of the donors with the most similar, with the greatest facial resemblance at the top. And obviously the other factors such as genetic screening and also the other phenotypic factors and blood type will also be included in the analysis. The doctor can do that directly within the PhenoMatch platform. So I just want to give you some numbers. I want to demonstrate the stage we are at, because I know that when we talk about artificial intelligence, it might seem like we are talking about the future or talking about research. But just to be clear, we started operating commercially in 2018. And that was here in Spain, because PhenoMatch is a Spanish company. The first PhenoMatch babies were in May 2019. We currently work with around 100 clinics, and we've helped around 7,000 families get started. I believe we're closer to 7,500 now. So that is that's the stage we're at the moment. That's how things are going. We have several clinics in Europe. Many, of course, are in Spain. We are also in South America. We are in Asia, and we're in Russia as well. So let's get to the slightly technical part. I hope this will still be still interesting. I'm sure that you've heard a lot about neural networks already today, but essentially, yeah, it's an algorithm. It's a neural network, and we started out with the training on 864 faces from 108 families, and we had a 1-to-1 gender ratio, and we were working with various different ethnicities, of course. Why did we need 108 different families? Well, what we're looking for is the phenotypic traits, which are those shared by various family members. So by analyzing the degree of similarity between members of the same family, we can ensure that our algorithm is looking at phenotype, which is what's important when we're talking about donor-assisted children. We've tested the algorithm, of course, and in the last test, which I did earlier this month, in fact it was last month because it's December now, of course, I gave the algorithm 600 human faces, and within those 600 human faces was my brother. And I asked the algorithm to say which of these people was most similar to me, and it was able to identify my brother. Got a very high score, which indicates a very high degree of certainty and a very high facial resemblance, and it's able to do that, of course, within a matter of seconds. We have a very powerful server system, and the algorithm is very quick and, of course, very accurate and gets very good results. Yeah, so many people think of PhenoMatch as a variation on facial recognition. Facial recognition is something that's fairly common nowadays. I'm sure if you have an iPhone and you bought your iPhone in the last 3 or 4 years, you probably unlock it using your face. That's facial recognition. What PhenoMatch does is very different. We identify phenotypic traits and assigning a score from 0 to 100 based on the degree of facial resemblance. So I want to show you an example. I'm going to show you 2 photographs of 2 people, and you might not be a doctor, you might not be a medical professional, but if you look really closely, you might be able to see some degree of facial resemblance. And you won't see it straight away, but if you look, you'll see it. Okay, so that is my mum and my brother at my brother's wedding last year, and this was pre-COVID, of course. And you can see very clearly traits like the shape of the nose, the smile in the teeth, and the hairline, of course. And overall what we consider the look, the way this person looks. And that's what our algorithm is focused on. It's an improvement on traditional donor selection, because as well as filtering donors by phenotypic traits like eye color or height, we can look at the whole face. And what's more, our algorithm can find egg or sperm donors using photos of men or women. As you can see in the image, phenotypic traits are shared by both genders. So we can, of course, work with lesbian and gay couples seeking sperm or egg donation, as well as heterosexual couples, of course. So, since we began in 2018, as I said, here in Spain, we've been collecting feedback from our clinics here, of course, on the home territory, as well as in South America, India, Russia, and around Europe, of course. One of the first changes that we made, and this was a few years ago now, was the introduction of the patient certificate system. So these are certificates that can be issued to the patient either via email, or they can also be printed with the patient's details. And there is also a verification code. So that can be checked on our website, phenomatch.com, in order to validate the PhenoMatch process. The certificates don't actually have any identifying information about the donor, although the certificates can be modified to include that information, translation of the region where the tool has been used. But it's something that patients have asked for, this certificate system, and it's something that patients really appreciate. It's a link to the PhenoMatch system that tells them that the PhenoMatch has been done and the facial matching has been used. So that was something that we implemented after one of our clinics mentioned that the patients really would appreciate something like that. Time saving, this is a comment that we absolutely love, of course, because time saving is the result of good design, and the design of PhenoMatch, especially the UI, is not something that I was personally responsible for, but I think it's something we've done very well. We have a web app which is very easy to use, very well designed, and we find that when the clinics come from a situation where they don't have specific software for donor database management, or they're using generic database management software, that makes things slightly complicated, and it makes certain processes take longer. But with PhenoMatch, you have something which was specifically designed to deal with egg banks and sperm banks. So it's a donor database. And it also helps to connect to external donor databases. And we meet, of course, GDPR in Europe, which is very important, as well as I believe the data privacy regulations in Brazil are also very strict, and we're operating there with absolutely no problems, as well as in Russia, which has its own legislation. So our software is designed in order to match the legislation of these various territories. So it's secure, it's encrypted. We don't use the personal data for anything other than the facial matching. And apart from all of those things, the user interface is very well designed, very easy to use. It's web-based, of course, so it's available anywhere on mobile phones, on tablets, on laptops, on computers, and it's something we've spent a lot of time working on, and it's something that we're getting great feedback about. Ethnicity verification. Okay, the platform also has many features that help to avoid or minimize human error. There are several of them, of course, but the one we added most recently is artificial intelligence ethnicity verification. So if a donor's photo doesn't appear to match their stated ethnicity, we can inform the user, and then the user can manually verify that. And also, if you're doing the facial matching and there is or appears to be a mismatch of ethnicities between the recipient and one or more of the potential donors, the system also notifies the user. So AI ethnicity verification, yeah, that's very big, that sounds very exciting, but as they said, there are many features related to avoiding and minimizing the risk of human error, which are built into the platform. Okay, and finally, and this is absolutely one of the key things for us, because you can use our software to connect to external databases and other sperm and egg banks, we can help clinics to access a greater number of donors. And this is a key part of what we do. The facial matching, like all artificial intelligence, works better and gets better results when you have a large data set. And by improving or increasing the number of potential donors that you have, you're going to get better results every time, just because of the fact that you have a wider choice. So that's more or less everything I have to say. I hope it's been interesting. I personally find it fascinating. I know not everybody would agree with that, but that's what we do. So my email address is on the screen. If you've got any feedback, if you've got any questions, if you're interested in working with us, of course, please get in touch. And yeah, I'll hand you back to our host.
And also someone who has done a lot of work with fertility patients over the last few years, including many people who've been through donor treatment, whether that's sperm, egg, or embryo donation. You know, what a sort of huge process that is to go through. And this facial matching, I can see, will be incredibly a popular technology with patients. I mean, I'm sure that's what you're finding, Josh, is it?
Yes, that's definitely one thing that one of the feedbacks that we've been getting from the patients and from the clinics is how popular it is and how patients really love being able to have just that connection with the donor, especially when donation is anonymous.
Yes, yeah. So, but I guess we have to drill down on the ethics, don't we? So can we do that a bit? Because, you know, what is it? I understand that patients will want to choose egg, sperm, embryo donation that look like them. Are there any sort of issues around that you've had to explore from an ethical point of view?
Well, you know, I really love ethics. It's sort of one of my areas of expertise. I've written a book called Bad Decisions in Spanish about ethics, and I was also part of the creation of the Zaragoza Declaration on ethics related to artificial intelligence, which was a European Union project, which was fantastic. From an ethical point of view, the main thing I think is probably anonymity. And our point of view is that the tool helps to maintain anonymity, especially, well, you know, in regions where anonymity is the law. Doctors are already working with identifying data from the donors because, you know, of course, we have DNA, which is identifying, and doctors usually have access to the names of the donors, again, depending on the region. In the UK, for example, there's a national donor database.
Can you look at participants? People still watching?
So the photograph of the face is just another more medical data which is identifying, and as long as it's dealt with properly by the doctors and the people that are in charge of the process, then there aren't really any ethical issues.
So you say the main ethical issue is the anonymity of the anonymity around donation. So you're thinking of the donor there, are you, in particular? I just wonder whether, you know, does it, so I mean, where do you stand in terms of disclosure to donor children? Because obviously if you look very much like your parents, could there be, and is it a good thing or a bad thing, do you think, more of an inclination to have perhaps not disclose to your children that they're donor children? I mean, where do you stand on that ethical question?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's not something.
It's an important one, though, isn't it, Josh? I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, my personal view is always for disclosure, and I think the legislation is moving that way, in terms of where children, the children's rights are concerned. I always think that's the right way. I think early disclosure has the least psychological effect. So if you've had a donor-assisted child, then the best recommendation, I believe, on a psychological level is to disclose that as soon as possible and explain it, and then that stops it from becoming a huge secret.
Yeah.
In terms of PhenoMatch, I don't really consider that our technology is helping donors to, or parents of donor-assisted children,
or encouraging. I think maybe encouraging for less disclosure. I mean, I do think it's really interesting, and perhaps for anyone listening, you can, because you're probably more up on the legislation than I am, because you're working in this. Like, there is very different views on anonymity and on disclosure in different countries. But I'm really interested to hear that you're saying it's moving in a direction where disclosure is going to become the given. Do you think?
What I think we're moving towards is a situation where there's less anonymity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Disclosure, as far as I don't know what legislation there is in terms of disclosure to the donor-assisted children.
Yes, yeah.
I
don't think there is any, is there, at the moment? Yes,
yeah.
You're right.
But I do think that children have the right to know and the right to access that information about where they've come from.
And could there be any, again, staying around the ethical questions, could there be any, you know, one of the things that and I think that, you know, we're going to be talking about this is in the next session is about gene editing, and, you know, of course the fears around that are around designer babies. Do you think, I mean, obviously your technology is very much designed to create a matching with the parents, but could there be a situation, and how do you avoid a situation where I come in and I say, well, actually I don't want to match, I want the opposite of me? I mean, because I want to have a beautiful child, you know?
Yes.
Is that a possibility?
It's definitely, I mean, this is a possibility, of course. We all know that that's possible. It depends where you get your donor from. It depends on the legislation where you are. For example, in the United States, you can choose your donor from a catalog. PhenoMatch, in a sense, is a quite traditional tool, because what we do exclusively is the phenotype matching. So that means what you're talking about is not something that we do, and it's not something that we're focusing on at the moment.
Yeah. So your technology sort of does the opposite of that. So, and it's very much geared to that. And just tell us, again, you know, like, I mean, the growth of it in the last, I mean, you said, I think the company established in 2018, is that correct?
That's right.
And it started to roll out in Spain, started to roll out. Where, I mean, what clinics is it being used in around the country now?
Around the country of Spain, that's of course where we have most of our clinics. Yes. We've just started, I believe, 2 months ago with our first clinic in Russia, and we're also looking at clinics in the United States at the moment, and of course in the UK, which is very exciting to me because I'm from England. Of course.
Yeah. very impressed that you wrote a book in Spanish, because yes, you don't sound as if you're Spanish.
Yeah, I did. It was translated and published in Spanish. I did write it in English, actually.
Oh, you didn't need to disclose that, but there you go. I believe in disclosure. I know.
Yes. I've just seen a question from Phil Spur on the chat. Is it okay if I deal with that?
Yes, do, definitely.
So Phil says, given the framework in place governing anonymity of donors, is there any way that this technology could result with legal ramifications? This is a good question. And it's true that, you know, aside from the ethics, which I personally find fascinating, we're always looking at legislation and laws. And it's one of the things that we make sure whenever we move into a new territory that we are operating legally. And yeah, like I said, in the countries where we operate, the doctors and the medical teams of the clinics are able to access information about the donors. Of course, that information is necessary to do their jobs. Donors only have to be anonymous towards the recipients, towards the patient, towards the general public. So we can operate legally almost anywhere around the world. It just depends what information is available on donors.
Right. So where you started to tell us where the clinics, what clinics you're working with, but you're having good conversations with the UK as well at the moment.
Yes, that's right. Tomorrow, I believe. Yeah, tomorrow. That's right. At 2, I have a conversation with Andrew Coots from the International Fertility Company, and I'll be talking with Salome from Clinic Vista Hermosa, which is a Spanish clinic, and we'll be talking about access to PhenoMatch for English patients, both those that choose to go for treatment in the UK and those that go for treatment abroad.
And tell us, you know, like where you see things in terms of your business plan as a company. Where do you see things developing over the next few years for you?
Well, I think at the moment we have a product that works, and it's, you know, that's something which I'm incredibly proud of. It is a solution to a very specific problem, and it's very efficient and very accurate, and it saves the clinics a lot of time. So the next step, I think, is the international rollout. I think, and for me, that's one of the most exciting parts. We're looking to get more clinics in more regions and more territories. And I think that's the situation over the next couple of years.
And in terms of the recruitment of donors, how are you finding that in different countries?
Recruitment of the donors is something which is really, really key to our technology, basically. Just like with any AI, the more data you have, the better results that you get. And so donor recruitment is one of the first things that we talk about whenever we talk to one of the new clinics. How do you get donors? How many donors do you have? How many do you have access to? And another one of the features of PhenoMatch is the ability to connect automatically to other databases. So if you have a clinic in London, and for example, that clinic might have their own gamete bank with their own sperm and own eggs, we can allow doctors from that clinic to not only access those gametes, those donor egg and donor sperm, but also to access external databases that are stored around the country and also abroad through the platform. So
do you think we might see more collaboration between clinics in that respect?
I hope so.
Worldwide?
It's definitely something that would be better for the patient, of course. Yeah. It would be much better for the patient. And of course, realistically, I know that there are clinics that maybe don't have as many donors as would be ideal. And so this is a really big opportunity.
And at the moment, I mean, I know that a lot of patients in the UK are going abroad for donor treatment for a variety of reasons. I mean, are you allowed to say, you know, where you feel that the pool of donors is very strong, where there needs to be more development? Is that something that because you're not involved in recruiting donors yourself as a company, you're offering the technology once the donors are recruited, are you?
Yes, that's right. What we offer is the phenomatching technology, so we can match patients by their facial resemblance So we can find the donor with the greatest facial resemblance, and we can match by all the industry standard criteria as too. So we don't do a lot, or in fact, we don't do any donor recruitment. That's something that clinics and banks are responsible for themselves. However, what I can say is that I think the problems that clinics and banks tend to have are the same, at least in Spain and the US. And I think the biggest issue tends to be with ethnic minorities, with Black donors, with Asian donors.
Yes, absolutely. That is a real problem. We've had quite a lot of publicity about that in the UK recently, that how hard it is to get donors from ethnic minority communities. So hopefully we will see a change in that. What do you think, as a sort of final question, and I know you're not involved in the recruitment of donors, but your technology is going to work the best for patients the more donors that we have. What do you think that we need to be saying to people about about the importance and the returns from donating? Like what do you think is going to encourage people?
That's a really good question, because the move away from anonymous donation is going to make things extra complicated in that sense. However, I think clinics need to communicate the legal rights and the legal responsibilities of donors, because a lot of that is kind of in a gray area. There needs to be more disclosure in terms of what people will be able to do with DNA testing in 10, 20, 30 years, because the idea of anonymity is little by little falling apart.
It is falling apart, yes.
Yeah. And I think also we're just generally in a moment of industry change. And hopefully, once this sort of new generation of legislation is applied in terms of anonymity, hopefully things will be a little simpler for everyone, and we'll see more and more donors, I think.
So would you like to see a world where the legislation was the same world over? I mean, is that the sort of thing that you would call for?
I mean, no, is the answer to that question.
Right, okay.
I think that this is an issue that, is always going to be complicated, even within the European Union, even with countries like France, Spain, Germany, the UK, Italy, Ukraine, all have different legislation. And I don't necessarily think that uniformity of legislation is something that's completely ideal. Yeah.
Right, yeah. Well, thank you, Josh. Is there anything, before we just move on to our final speaker today, is there anything that you would like to finish with, or in terms of where people can get more information? Because I absolutely know that your technology is going to be extremely popular with patients, and we are only going to see more patients seeking donation in the future. I'm sure of that.
Yeah, the only thing I'd like to say is probably the best way to get in touch with us is visiting us at phenomatch.com. And because we're a Spanish company, Phenomatch is spelled with an F. So that's F-E-N-O and then match.com. And thank you, Jessica, Laura, and thank you to all the other speakers.
Thank you. Right, we are now on to our final talk for today, and it is from Dr. Uzma Chowdhury from Octopus Ventures, and it's on a subject which I know that everyone loves, money, because Octopus are an investment company, and Uzma conducts due diligence and deal making around frontier technologies within the health and biotech fields. She's going to be talking to us about the future of fertility tech, including the development of technologies such as gene editing, which of course is right at the frontier of infertility tech. In fact, the creators of gene editing just won the Nobel Prize. And she's also going to be talking, I think, about some other areas of technology development that I, and perhaps all of us listening, have never heard of. So we look forward to being educated. Over to you, Uzma.
Hello everyone, it's a pleasure to have the opportunity to speak about Octopus Ventures and our interest in the femtech and fertility space at the Giant Health platform today. I am Osma. I am part of the Octopus Ventures investment team along with 28 other investment professionals. We have expertise within 4 core areas, and these include deep tech, which is technology that can drive the next industrial revolution, such as quantum computing. Another team that is looking at future of health, and this includes everything from digital health platforms to biotech and life sciences, although we don't touch therapeutics. Then we have a team that's looking at future of money and primarily looking at the fintech and insurtech space. We have a team that's looking at consumer businesses, and we also have another team looking at growth types of investments, and these are mostly Series B plus investment rounds. In terms of, I guess, a bit more about the health team, where there are 5 of us focused on identifying category-defining businesses that would change the future of health as we know today. And some of the areas where we have delved into over the last few years have been taboo, mental health, femtech, and recently fertility. And we also have been looking at sort of more frontier tech opportunities from a personalized healthcare perspective, looking at stratifying patients, better diagnostic assays, and new synthetic biology platforms to create novel types of treatments and therapeutics. And so those are some of the areas that we spend a lot of our time looking into and meet a bunch of businesses there. Within femtech, I think we remain excited about femtech, and I think our portfolio company LB is testament to this, with a pioneering founder and entrepreneur in the space that has looked at addressing problems of women with their new breast pump product, and historically a pelvic floor trainer device. And we continue to look for businesses that are looking at femtech issues, but also fertility. I think fertility is an area that we feel is ripe for innovation. We feel that there are many ways to drive efficiency and better outcomes in that space. And mostly we feel that there are issues with accessibility of fertility treatments, of fertility solutions, but also the cost of such treatments, which currently is only really making these treatments accessible to a small portion of the population. I think there is also lots of exciting research and R&D happening on a number of other fronts, which will help people identify the risk of infertility early on, and as such allow interventions to prevent infertility. Right now, where we're looking at making people more fertile, I think in future some of this R&D will lead to actually being able to reverse infertility and make infertile people fertile. There is also lots of exciting research on transplant of ovarian and testicular tissue, which can open new doors and new opportunities in allowing reproductive opportunities to transgender and gay populations, but also to populations that have hit menopause or beyond their fertility window. there is so much happening in the male contraception space as well. And I think that, fertility isn't something that only affects women. Fertility is also an issue for the male population. And as you spend more time looking through the literature and publications, male fertility has really, really drastically decreased over the last couple of decades. And that is a problem, and there are a number of startups that are looking at early on identifying fertility issues and issues with sperm motility and sperm quality to allow these populations to take interventions and store their sperm early on if there is a risk of losing their fertility over time. Moreover, there's interesting research happening in the male contraception space. So although typically today contraception relies heavily on the female population, and it's very, very little of the contraceptive responsibility lies on men. In future, there is the possibility of actually having more male contraceptive options, although that is something that is still maybe 7 to 10 years away at minimum. And I think there is loads that there is a significant opportunity in actually learning a bit more about fertility, a bit more about how fertility changes for different patient groups, and actually looking at all the data we have on broader population to allow for personalization and really try to deconvolute some of the patterns and underlying reasons why some people may be becoming maybe more at risk of losing fertility early on, or may have a shorter window of fertility. And this sort of more personalized approach will allow men and women more control over their fertility and decisions relating to their fertility. So I think there is so much information within the hormonal profiles, the genetic profiles, and the mental health and medical history of patients. And historically, no one has actually, tried to bring all of those data points together to understand a bit more about someone's predisposition to conception or loss of fertility, or even so far as potential, effectiveness of a specific drug for them. And so I think this whole wave of personalization that is coming across, medicine and healthcare broadly will also push innovation within fertility as well. As I mentioned, one of the big issues with fertility today is access to these solutions and access to fertility treatments, and the number of places that you can go to for fertility services. And I think seeing a bit more activity on that front of actually giving women and men more insight and more control over, and more information about their fertility through businesses that are looking at using various different types of tests and, clinical tests such as saliva tests or blood tests to track their fertility. And so moving this attitude of, more reactive rather than proactive towards fertility is going to be another big change that I envisage over the next 5 to 10 years. I think historically people only really sort of realize that they can't conceive or are having fertility issues when they try to conceive. In future, I think with some of the businesses and solutions that I've seen people build, I think that most people will start taking more ownership of their fertility and understand what's happening with their fertility and over time. And won't necessarily only find out that they have fertility issues when they're trying to conceive. So really moving from a reactive kind of position to a proactive positioning on fertility tracking and fertility enhancement. And these are all areas where I think there is lots of exciting stuff happening, all the way from, you know, sort of digital platforms to more R&D heavy businesses that are coming out of lab trying to understand how to better classify and stratify sperms and eggs and into, you know, their quality, but understanding their rate of success, but also from a perspective of stratifying fertility status of people, and being able to do that in, you know, I guess more from a early point of view rather than in hindsight when people are struggling to conceive. So I think overall on you know, we've met a bunch of businesses in this space, and we are very much excited about a few that we have in our pipeline, and hopefully we'll be pushing out and announcing. But there are loads of areas where I still see huge gaps. So, for example, endometriosis. The diagnosis and treatment of endometriosis is an unsolved problem, and it's a huge and a big problem. And actually, to understand how many people who end up struggling conceiving because of endometriosis, it's actually quite a hard problem for patients that suffer with endometriosis. And really, I think there will be lots of advancement in areas like, and our knowledge about and our ability to treat and diagnose conditions like endometriosis and polycystic ovarian syndrome. And some of these, again, you know, I guess they end up being diagnosed when people are having fertility issues or conception issues. And again, being able to better diagnose and treat these conditions may not only make a huge difference to the quality of life for those who are afflicted with those conditions, but also for their fertility and for their fertility planning. And so I think that's an area where I'm quite interested in seeing novel solutions and novel diagnostic methods and novel treatments. There's also, I think, a significant amount of overlap between hormonal health and your fertility and your mental well-being, yet hormonal health can very much be like a black box that, you know, I guess is hardly touched. And so that's an area that I'm personally really keen on understanding, is how do you deconvolute the relationship of hormone, not only, you know, sort of, I guess, the complexity of how females' hormones change on a 28-day basis, but also throughout their sort of puberty to adolescence to maybe when they're trying to conceive to when they hit menopause. So it's a complicated sort of hormonal change that a woman would go through in her life. And similarly, I guess men will have a different type of hormonal sort of like profile changes, but they will, all of these affect not only your quality of life, your fertility, your I guess fertility options, and also your overall well-being and happiness. So it would be great, I guess, to see some innovation in the space where people are trying to really unravel the fine links between hormonal health and the broader general well-being and fertility of people. And I guess another area that where I think we get really, really excited about is these huge gap in contraception market on the other end. So I guess fertility is one side, but contraception is also an area where we have seen very, very little innovation in the last few decades. And to think that some of the contraceptive options that are available have very potent side effects, and yet still, they are being prescribed on the regular, and actually how much time is spent in understanding whether that particular contraceptive is suitable to a person, to their mental well-being profile, to their genetic profile, to their overall I guess fertility goals in future, and their predispositions to specific conditions, for example, migraines or depression, etc. And I feel like there is a big gap in the market on this end as well, that actually we don't have any way of having more personalized contraceptives, or contraceptives that don't have strong side effects. And so really keen on seeing some solutions on that front too. And I guess to sum it all up, it seems like fertility and femtech is an area which is really ripe for innovation. There are several I guess subsections of this where I feel there is a huge gap of innovation that has been historically stagnant due to several reasons. But now that we're seeing more and more startups addressing these problems, or addressing women's problems, addressing fertility issues, I am very hopeful about seeing a whole slew of new innovations in this space. But yeah, I think if you have any other questions for me, I am happy to take them over email, or just drop me a message and I shall come back to you. Thank you very much for listening to me today. And as always, very happy to sit down and discuss some of my thoughts with you about the space, but also if you have any ideas that you would like to share, or if you're thinking about a venture or building a business, then we would love to hear from you. Thank you so much.
Hello, I don't know if we're live. Oh, we're live now. We're really slick now. We are doing the business, and I want to thank Uzma for that great talk, which was really fascinating. And what I thought was really interesting, Uzma is sadly not joining us for a live Q&A. So I just want to sum up what I thought was really interesting, is that not only did she talk through some of the developments that are happening at the moment in terms of femtech and fertility tech, she also pointed to some of the developments that she thinks that there are, or gaps in the market that she thinks that we should be exploring. And actually, if anyone is watching out there and saw Uzma's talk and is developing technology around some of those areas that she was particularly interested in, well, she's a venture capitalist, so I would get in touch with her. And she did say at the end of the talk that she is really interested in hearing from people, including startups that are developing those new technologies. So and that is it for the fertility track at the Giant Health 2020 conference. I want to thank all our speakers. for their time. I want to also apologize for the technology problems at a tech conference that we had at the beginning of the day, particularly. I do think that we got a little bit more streamlined. Please do contact the speakers, and some of them are exhibiting at the conference, and hopefully you'll be able to contact them there. Otherwise, I'm sure that you can find their details on the Giant conference platform or Google, or do contact us at the Fertility Show, and we will put you in touch. So that's it for now. I just want to say thank you very much for joining the Fertility Track at Giant 2020, which has been sponsored by the Fertility Show, the UK's largest patient event, which wasn't able to run this year live, but we will be running a series of online talks from next year leading up to the next live show in September 2021. See you there. Thanks. Bye.